Hello, Lifers. It's Jason Love of Jason Loves Life, and we got a question from Ronnie about what were the reasons we got Everett tested in the first place. And Ronnie, the person who asked the question, also talked about waiting. If you guys seen the original video that we did about when Everett got his autism, they mentioned waiting in the waiting room, and it was an interesting point. You could read that comment. Actually, I don't know how we would do that. You could technically go over, I believe, and check, but there's a lot of comments. It's a big busy video. But they said it was strange that you had to wait for the results, and it is a little bit strange now that you say that. But back to your original question. The question was, there seems to be a lot of fireworks here. We're at a park. The kids are over there playing, and there were fireworks the other night. I don't know what the deal is. I guess summer's starting. So anyways, the reasons why he got tested was he had slow speech. I'm trying to think of all the steps. So he had slow speech. Now, I worked with kids with a variety of disabilities early on with a neuro rehab center that worked with kids who actually stayed at our facility. And so I have a psychology background. I don't work much with that other than these videos these days. But so there was a point in my life where that was kind of like the norm for me. So early on, Everett had some certain quirks. One example would be where he would be defiant no matter what the question was. Like when he got a certain, I don't know, it was like a certain situation. So he would get kind of so upset where you'd even be like, he'd say no. If you said sit, he would say stand. And like literally the opposite. So even if you gave him the most extreme situation being like, eat ice cream, he would say no, even though he loved ice cream. It was like so I kind of wondered at first if he had some type of defiant disorder or something like that, which I don't know a lot about, just because we didn't, usually it was, when I worked with students, it was usually like along with like bipolar and a bunch of list of other stuff. So there was a lot of stuff like that where we just assumed it was a normal thing. When he got angry, he had certain repetitive behaviors he really loved. So reading at night was a big thing. He didn't really like books, but if it was like the same book every night, I could kind of like work it in so that he would listen to it. But then basically if his mom ever read it, he would get upset because she didn't read it the way I did. Like I would do certain emphasis and I'd slowly adapt it over time. So for example, one of the adaptations was eventually he learned the alphabet pretty quick at one point through watching like certain videos. And that's a whole nother story. So, but he knew his alphabet at a pretty young age. And so I would read it, and when it was the letter I would point, and he would say I, and then I would read, and then I would point, because this book had the word I in it a lot, as in like the first person narrative. So if you didn't read it that way, and if you didn't give that certain emphasis, and you didn't do like that sort of rhyme pattern, he would get or like the cadence, I guess, he would get upset. And so that was a clue, but we just assumed, it was just weird. If we tried to sing to him, he would get upset. So Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, all that, he would get upset. And so then we got him speech therapy through the school. We got him tested for speech therapy, and bringing back to like my background, I kept kind of saying, hey, I want kind of worry about it could be this, it could be this. But both Lee and I kind of assumed I was just being paranoid because I have like anxiety issues. So we just assumed it was related to me and not actually Everett. And so then he had this speech therapy that he qualified for through the school district, which Evelyn later did and didn't pass. So it was there was definitely a cutoff that he made. He was behind. And actually we had a friend even before that, now that I think about it, who said she was a speech pathologist or whatever the term is, and she said, hey, he seems to be behind, you might want to get him checked, when we went at a party. And so so we did that, and then during that I finally was kind of like, hey Lee, I really think we should get him checked for autism, just because he had all these quirks, behind on speech. I'm sure he had more I can't think of. He did make eye contact. That wasn't really an issue. He had an issue with certain words in the sense of, for the longest time, he kind of talked as if he like memorized like the sentences instead of like the actual individual words. So instead of saying, I'm hungry, he kind of learned that like that thread meant to eat. And so that was, and I think that's early learning, how you early learn language. But basically he knew if he said that phrase, but saw it as a phrase and not like as words making up a phrase. So he also had an issue, I think this was at that time, where he would call Leah daddy sometimes. Like he'd mix up the words and kind of just use certain words as like like a catch-all. And then also I know, and I can't remember if this is time-wise fits, but he had a long time where he would say I love you to me, and then Leah would say I love you, and he'd be like I love daddy. It was just this thing where I think at that time he didn't really understand that he could love more than one person. Like there was something, that's the only thing I can come up with. Again, this is me sort of projecting it, like sort of, I have no real idea if this is correct. So then eventually it convinced Leah to mention that to the speech therapists that were from the district, and they said, yeah, we think he should get tested for autism. And they actually said, we kind of got the impression they actually were thinking that for a while. And so that's why if you're hesitant, I would just ask whoever you have connections with. So maybe go to the district, your school district, and say, hey, I have this, here's the situation. Do you have any resources for me or for my child? Whether it's speech delays, whatever. And then just ask people. And I think in a lot of situations I've heard from other parents, and there's not like 100%, like, this person will say it and this person. Anyways, after that, we had to actually get his pediatrician to say, yeah, let's get him tested. And he did. He actually was similar. Like he only saw him once a year, so he didn't have enough to go off of, but he said, yeah, let's do this. So even if you have no one other resources, ask your pediatrician, your child's pediatrician. So yeah, and then we got him tested. So some other things that came up, I'm trying to think of anything else. He would get certain fixations. He still loves repetition, and that, it's funny because a lot of people didn't think he was on the autism spectrum early on, like family members. And I'd say, oh, he loves repetition. They say, oh yeah, I love repetition. It's like, no. He loved like, it's normal to like the same movie, but he would literally listen to the same 5 seconds, like over and over and over again. And he still likes it. And it's actually his sister likes it now, and I think it's because he does it so much. Evelyn likes it. And he still does it. He doesn't do it on that same level. Like now it's a little bit more like, okay, especially around comedy. So I think he's kind of like picking up. So it's like, this is really funny. So he listens to it like 20 times in a row. The same like slapstick piece of a movie. So yeah, that was kind of a long answer. I hope that helps. I might do this with Leah because there's a lot of like memory parts that I'm sure I don't remember. But yeah, really, if you question it at all, I would at least ask somebody, and they can give you, especially a professional, I should say, because they know what kids that age are supposed to be like. They have more of a context, and so, like even now we're having a kind of a fight because his speech therapist says he doesn't need speech, but I know his teacher thinks he needs speech, and we think he needs speech. So we took it out for just a little bit because like this whole COVID situation. But my guess is he's going to be back in speech at some point because. I just think the speech therapist doesn't get enough time with him. She literally only has him for 10 minutes a week. And it's like, dude, if you talk to him he's come an amazing long way. He's, he's worked really hard. But I think it could, compared to his peers, he hasn't caught up to them yet. So I'd rather have the continued speech therapy. And if that speech therapist doesn't have anything for him, we're going to look for another speech therapist. It's kind of the plan, even if we have to pay a little bit out of the pocket, even though we shouldn't have to. I mean, the school gets paid for to have someone there, so it's sort of one of those things where, it's just a system. You gotta figure out your system. So, hope that's helpful. We'll try to do a longer video on this, not a longer because it's like 10 minutes, but a more concise one with Leah sometime. So, hope that helps. Have a great evening or day or morning or wherever you're at. All right. See ya.